So let's try this. This is going to be kind of a dark video because I just did some firmware updates on this XT3, which I love Fuji cameras, but their autofocus sucks. So we're going to see how the autofocus does because it should have some improved autofocus. So we'll see how that works out. But okay, so I wanted to do a quick video to have an honest discussion on making money off of retics. So this video is called How to Become a Millionaire, or How to Make $1 Million Breeding Retics. So I figured I'd give you some breakdowns of some numbers to kind of get people to come to terms with the reality of breeding reptiles in general, and retics more specifically because they have such a limited demand, and retics represent significantly less than 1% of the overall reptile industry. So to try to make a massive amount of money off of retics, it's not like selling drugs. It's just not. It's not like selling ball pythons. So to give a quick breakdown of this is what you would have to do to make $1 million. And this is just to prove the point that trying to make $1 million selling retics probably isn't a good business strategy. So here's some numbers. To make $1 million selling retics, you would have to make over $83,000 a month. Okay? Over $83,000 a month selling retics. That's you would have to sell 100 retics at $10,000 a piece in a year. You would have that, or 8.3 $10,000 snakes a month. You'd have to sell 200 $5,000 retics a year. That's just over 16 a month. You would have to sell 1,000 $1,000 retics a year, and that's 83 a month. If you're selling lower end stuff, 500 at $500 a piece, you would have to sell 2,000 retics at $500. That's 166 a month. And if you're selling them as low as $100, you would have to sell 10,000. So you'd have to sell 833 retics a month. So just to give you an idea of how unfeasible it is to do $1 million off of retics. And to be honest, it probably is doable if you have a global market, but you're into such high numbers and you're at such a point of being a retic puppy mill, and then you want to try to sustain it, over a long period of times. It's just not a good idea. So that's why I just wanted to give those numbers really quick as kind of, a baseline of what you're looking at selling. 166 retics a month at $500 a piece. You're not going to do it, nor should you. So if you wanted to make 100,000, okay, that's a lot more doable. That is a lot more doable. And those numbers, obviously get cut way down. So, you just take 2 zeros off of all the numbers we just ran through, then that's your numbers for making 100,000. So, but, to make 100,000, that's still even kind of hard. That's still not the easiest route to go. So, I'll run through these numbers to make 100,000. So for 500 at $500 a sale or a snake, you got to sell 200. That's 16 a month. At $1,000 a sale, that's $100,000 animal sales a year. That's 8.3 a month. At $2,500, that's 40 a year, 3.3 a month. 5,000, that's 21.6, and and $10,000 animal sell, you only got to do 10 of them. That's 0.83 per month. But the thing is, we're heading, well, we're really getting into the recession now. Like, now that things have kind of like have caught up with the COVID nonsense, and the fact that the Republicans only got back the House and not the Senate, there's not going to be a whole lot of financial turnaround. So the recession is probably going to get worse, and we're really going to start feeling it because everybody's money's officially starting to run out. And when you look at the money that it's costing to go to the store and on gas now, it's ridiculous. And we're dealing in snakes, and they are essentially a luxury item. They are purchased with expendable cash. And as, everything goes up in price, that expendable cash quickly fades away, and it's just non-existent. So that's something to think about if you're trying to get rich off of retics. And this is, like I said, this is a species that represents significantly less than 1% of all the revenue within the reptile industry as a whole. So, how should you run your business model? I suggest you shooting to make 100,000 or less, not or more, 100,000 or less, because those numbers are doable. Finding 100 people to spend $1,000 on a snake is still kind of tough, but it's a lot easier than finding 1,000 people to buy a snake at $1,000 each, like you would need to do if you're trying to make $1 million. I can tell you what you don't want to do. The recipe for absolute 100% guaranteed failure is buying a giant facility and thinking there is enough demand in a market, and the market will be sustainable for the long term, so you can cover overhead. When you look at things like Brian Barczyk, how many times has he failed as a snake breeder? Like enough that he makes garbage YouTube content. Look at Jay Brewer, he was the largest producer of retics in the world. It didn't take very long for his business model to crash and burn, which I said it would a long time ago. Look what happened. Look what has happened to Nerd. Nerd's probably only really surviving because they're also kind of a pet store. Look at Bob. What did he have to do? He had to, for how many years was he just doing auctions, just to the highest bidder, just mass production, and hope you're selling enough to cover your bills and make some profit. So a guaranteed failure is to invest heavily in a single species, buy a large facility, and then you need a bunch of employees to help you run it. That is 100% the recipe for failure in the reptile industry. So why don't we take a look at an example? And we're going to use what has up until now, in the last few years, been the most successful business model in retics, and that's Reach Out Reptiles. So you can't deny how well they've been doing and how well they've done. But when I heard Garrett was buying that facility, I called Andrew and said, you need to try to talk Garrett out of this. If he's your friend, you need to try to talk him out of it. And he said, it's not happening. There's no way I'm talking him out of it. I said, but what do we know? We know that retics have such a small demand, comparatively speaking, and we know pretty much every breeder who's tried this giant facility style is either turned into a puppy mill or has just failed completely, or is making garbage content on YouTube because the massive amount of overhead to care for that many animals isn't really profitable. So I ran some estimate numbers, and we're going to run through these estimates. Okay, so let's look at reach out reptiles. Question is strictly mathematical. Is reach out reptiles doomed to failure like every other reptile breeder that's bought a giant facility and tried to focus so heavily on a single animal? Now, I know they got their African house snakes, but we're not really going to count them because they're African house snakes. Okay, so I did a quick budget of reach out reptiles monthly and yearly costs, and I can't know if this is correct, but I will say that I would bet a significant amount of money that this is under what their monthly expenses and yearly expenses are. So this is average guesstimate expenses of reach out reptiles. Monthly mortgage, $2,500. That is $30,000 a year. Employees, we'll say that's $120,000 a month. That's 5 employees at $24,000 or 4 employees at $40,000. And after taxes, there's a bunch of employees there, so I think it's a safe bet to say that it's $120,000 a year. It's probably more than that. And this is going to be expenses. These numbers are before making profit. This will just be overhead. So that's $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year. We're going to say utilities. We're going to go light on that. We're going to say $500 a month, so $6,000 a year. And then we're going to say food and everything else to care for the massive amount of retics. We're going to say that's only $1,000 a month, and that's not right. It's more than that. But we'll say $1,000 a month. So that's $12,000 a year. So your monthly cost for reach out reptiles, low estimate, $14,000. Low estimate, $14,000. Low estimate yearly expenses, $168,000. Now it's more than that. It's probably $200,000 plus. So, but we're gonna go with $168,000 a month or a year. Sorry. Okay. So how does that break down for a production? Okay, so if you got to make $14,000 a month to break even, you got to sell 28 $500 snakes. That's almost a snake a day at $500. Or you got to sell 14 $1,000 animals. That's a snake every other day for $1,000. For a $2,500 snake, that's 5.6. For a $5,000 snake, that's 2.8 a month. And for 10,000, it's 1.4. So we're heading into a recession. So the $10,000 snakes, we might as well not even pretend like that's a thing. But for a year, to cover that $168,000 yearly cost, like I said, it's probably 200 plus. You have to sell 336 $500 snakes. So now you're into puppy mill production on your $500 level. For $1,000, you got to sell 168. For $2,500, you got to sell 67.2. 5,000 a year, you got to sell 33.6. And 10,000, not that it matters, but it's 16.8 because you're just probably not selling 16 snakes in a year at 10,000 each. At least not retics. These are ball pythons. Now that's just to break even at reach out reptiles. Now, if Garrett wants to do that plus make $100,000 to put in his pocket, so now you're at $268,000 a year. That's $22,333 a month. Think about that. So you'd have to sell, at $500 animals, you'd have to sell 44.6 a month. That's $535 a year, puppy mill production. At 1,000, you got to sell 22.3, $267 a year, almost puppy mill production. Well, pretty much. At $2,500 an animal, you got to sell 8.9 a month. that's 106 a year. At 5,000, that's 4.46 a month. That's 56.6 a year, roughly. And at $10,000, which you're not selling in a recession, you're probably not really selling that many $5,000 animals, to be honest, either in this recession. So, but that's, 2.23, 26.8, 2.23 a month, 26.8 a year. So realistically, your sales are going to be that $500 to $2,500, because you really don't want to go under that too much with retics, as you get into a kind of like a idiot class of people buying. Once you get under $500, you get into that throwaway pet type situation. And in a recession, you're gonna be hard pressed to sell $5,000 animals and above. And $5,000 snakes have never really sold, especially in retics. So they've, it's never really been a big thing, anyways. And $10,000 is, just forget it. So the question is reach out reptiles sustainable? Now we know it's virtually impossible to make $1 million. You can do it, but it's mass production, and you need a lot of animals that are hyped up. You need a lot of people interested, and it's really tough in a market that's so limited like retics. But even at, this is just over $250,000, is it feasible? Is it something you should aim for or try to achieve, to try to make, just over $250,000 a year, 100,000 of which 100,000 of which goes in your pocket, and the mass majority of, the other whatever percent of it goes to overhead. So there's a point in snake and reptile production where there's this kind of cutoff limit of where overhead gets so high that it dictates production in a way that you don't really like or want, because it becomes a numbers game. So I think what you Reach Out Reptiles is going to have to do is they're going to have to drop down from the super high-end production, and they're going to have to drop down into that 500 to 25. And they're really, during a recession, when this is expendable cash, and it costs, something at the store that costs $100 is now pushing 200 or at least 150. That all eats into this. And now we're not even getting into the cost to feed your snake for a year. I mean, everything adds up. And I know there's a lot of new breeders out there, and you've never done this through a recession before. It sucks. It's bad. Watch what happens to the ball python industry. Watch how many fucking people start putting up their collection, saying it's a scam, saying it's this, saying it's all bullshit, saying that the market's dead. No, it's called overproduction during a recession, which equals no sales, because nobody can afford gas, let alone a ball python. So you're going to see ball pythons hit really, really hard. And that's the snake that is so much more focused around production and money and trades and all of that aspect of it, like almost like industrial farming and production, that it's not really about that species anymore. So the people that are working with the rarer stuff, like some of the Asian colubrids, or a white lip python, or scrub pythons, or just anything a little more rare that's driven by the species itself, not driven by market potential and this kind of Ponzi scheme of gene stacking, production method. So those animals, the rarer stuff that's not being mass produced, and there's not that much demand for them, but there's enough that producing a couple clutches, and you're guaranteed to sell them. Like if you hatched out, let's say you hatched out something like blue beauty snakes. I can guarantee you will sell your blue beauties immediately. You hatch out some albino ball pythons, maybe not so much. So there is a portion of this reptile industry that's not going to be terribly affected by a recession, but there's aspects of this industry that are going to be really hit hard. Ball pythons will probably be at the top of that list for getting hit the hardest. And retics have fortunately, for some time now, been kind of like a microcosm model of ball pythons. It's the same gene stacking approach, same excessive production and ignoring the minimal demand. And so retics are very much affected by things like a recession, because the demand is nowhere near what it is for ball pythons, but the production of them is so much greater per individual animal than, say, a ball python. So you're definitely going to get into that area where the retic market could crash very quickly and very easily. So it's going to be really important on limiting production. If you're producing a bunch of stuff, some of the lower end stuff, I know it sucks, but you might want to consider calling off some of your animals this season, just so you don't crash your own market. Personally, I'm not really breeding much this season. I'm doing a couple ternate things, a lot of F1 stuff. They don't lay many eggs anyways, so it doesn't matter. So I'm really, once I waited to see what happened with the midterms before I really tried breeding too much. I only have 2 clutches in an incubator right now. Normally I would have, what the hell's the day? I'd have at least 6, 4 to 8 by this time of year. But I'm just not shooting for it, because it's not looking like there's going to be enough demand and financial backing for that demand to justify a lot of production this season. So that is how I suggest you approach breeding this season, is limiting it, which I know breeding season's pretty much over and you've probably already done what you've done. But if you have a lot of males, if you have some low end stuff, consider calling them off. Considering if you're planning on breeding more stuff, see who else is doing those breedings and move and go from there and make a decision. Obviously, they're your animals. I can't tell you what to do, but I do recommend you limit breeding this season to avoid a market crash. So, and if you're in a position where you have a giant facility, which no one watching this really is, look at these numbers that I went through. Now, these were low end. These were low end numbers that, with employees, a large facility, your low end cost, you're looking at $14,000. You're looking at low end costs at Reach Out Reptiles right now is $14,000 a month. It's probably $10,000 more than that. Okay, so you're talking $500 a day. Reach Out Reptiles has to bring in just to cover costs. Just to cover the cost, $500. A day. That's insane. Let me do the math real quick. If we're going to pretend like it's only, what the fuck is my camera doing? I love Fuji, but they really need to get their shit together with their autofocus system. Okay, so we're going to pretend it's only $168,000 a year to run Reach Out Reptiles, and Garrett wants to put an additional $100,000 in his pocket. Okay, we're going to divide that by 12. I already know what that number is, but we're going to do it anyways because I wanted to get another number. Okay, so yeah, that's $22,333,333 whatever a month. So we're gonna divide that by 300 No, we're going to divide that by 30. Yeah, that's $744 a day. If you want to break even plus make $100,000, and you're talking about puppy mill production, we're talking, if you want to make those numbers selling retics for $250, you're talking about. Hold on, I'll tell you what we're talking about here. I'll give you the exact number. 268,000 divided by 250. 1,072 snakes. You'd have to produce 1,072 retics and then find 1,270 people to buy them. This isn't sustainable. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's crazy to see how Reach Out Reptiles has been the leader in this, and then gets a facility and mathematically have set themselves up for guaranteed failure. So what I suspect you'll see from them is a very high push for more YouTube stuff, trying to monetize there, and higher number of production on lower end animals. And the bad part about that is when you've built your brand about how your animals essentially are worth more than everyone else's, how do you lower your cost without diminishing your brand value and diminishing the overall value of all the animals in the market, because you're looking at having to produce 267 animals that sell for $1,000. So you're talking about injecting the retic market with, pushing 300 animals, and then you have everyone else's production. So I would try to really keep your retics to a basement breeder situation and shoot for that 100,000 or less, because those numbers are doable. And this is, I've talked before about the importance of diversifying your species. And even if you keep at least 25% of your collection of other species, because then you're not limited to one market. It's going to allow you to, say you want to make $100,000 and you got a bunch of retics, but you also have some boas, maybe some ball pythons, some other stuff, whatever it is. So now you only got to make, if you want to make 100,000, you only got to make 75,000 off your retics, and you can make 25,000 off the other 25% of your collection that's not retics. And chances are you'll make more than 25% off of those species, and you'll be making you'll probably, if you're trying to shoot for 100,000, you'll probably make 50,000 off of that other 25%, just as easily as you will make, because you're diversifying the amount of product that you're offering, and it's allowing you to get into more than one market. So you're not stuck in one market competing against everyone else for the same animals. So moving forward with retics, clearly super dwarfs are the way to go, but you gotta get some other localities in there. Obviously I'm going to plug my shit for that, which I recommend because that's what I do. And I highly recommend you look at the trend of what the mainland market has done, which has quickly moved towards darker T positives. I see how invested everyone is in Clark strain in super dwarfs, and I find it absolutely amazing that no one is really pushing the Indo caramel gene in superdwarfs. That's like my main plan, is to start implementing Indo into Turn 8 and Superdwarf. So I'm actually working on some of that stuff this season. Hopefully it works out. And Anthrax. So I really want to get Anthrax into that stuff. So those are the two things that I'm really hoping to hit on this season. And I'm just amazed that no one's figured out that if you have a Superdwarf Het Indo, that just turned all your Clark strain projects into Orange Glow projects. And I don't even want to produce Orange Glows. I could care less about them, but they're still a better looking animal than a Clark strain. And an Indo's even better than an Orange Glow. So I would really start trying to get ahead of the curve on this stuff. Anything that you're not seeing done with SD crosses, you might want to start moving in that direction. And it sucks. It takes a long time when you're working with simple recessives, but long term, that's going to pay off much better than just producing what everyone else is producing. So so that's a takeaway from this video. I hope you now know how to become a millionaire breeding retics, and you know why you do not want to go the Reach Out Reptile route of buying a facility, because you're going to end up in a position where your overhead is causing you to have to mass produce. And during a recession, no, the prices are already going to come down because they're not going to sell. And you add excessive production on top of a market crash created by lack of expendable money, you're going to see a major, major crash. And I think we're going to see, just from Reach Out Reptiles alone, I think they have the potential to crash the market this year, just themselves. I think they're going to have to produce so much stuff to make it worthwhile, because Garrett has to pay all that shit, plus he has a big family, so he needs a minimal of 100 G's a month or 100 G's a year. So he's going to have to produce numbers that have the potential to achieve that. But then the mark plus everyone else is producing. So now he's got all that competition, plus a lot of people that he sold to are now producing his stuff. And you're going to have a recession killing demand and killing expendable cash. So the prices are going to come down even more. So I see an animal that Reach Out Reptiles was selling for $1,500 for being significantly under $1,000 this year. An animal that was $5,000, that's going to get cut in half easy. I would say about a 50% cut across the board on Reach Out Reptile prices this year, just to try to cover overhead and make some money, because you have to have money when you have a big family. So we'll see what my predictions are, but they're not my predictions. Every year I put out a prediction. I usually type it up on Facebook and post it, and everyone gets real mad at me. And I'm almost like, I'll make a bunch of predictions, and I'm usually right like almost 100% of all the predictions. And the predictions this year are the recession is going to actually start to kick in. The expendable cash is going away. The amount of retics that are getting produced this year is going to far exceed demand of them. And you're going to have the lack of the expendable cash and demand driving the prices down even more. And then you're going to see what has up until now been the most successful name in the Super Dwarf game basically mass produced to try to meet overhead and slash prices, and pretty much end up just crashing their own market. That is my prediction for this year. So good luck on becoming a millionaire breeding retics. And if you need snakes to make that dream come true, hit me up and I'll take your money.